Dhabi attempting to get a deal to secure what the president calls affordable supply of petroleum products for the Ghanaian market. That move is now a subject of some intense scrutiny by industry experts. Former Chief Executive Officer for the bulk oil distributors, Senyor Hossi, has raised questions about the viability of this government approach of securing affordable petroleum products from the global market.
I really urge the presidency very directly, Mr. President, be cautious what you have promised and what you actually let unpromised to anyone. It's a very structured industry. There's nothing like affordable fuel or non-affordable fuel. Those are often defined by the market. They're also defined by quality, specification. And when people come and make promises, you just need to be a bit careful. There are few opportunities that scale can give us as a country. If we're all supposed to buy from one supplier, there's a lot of advantage in there where you could have a temporary savings. And those savings are not that significant. They are significant for traders, but not necessarily significant for the pump. The market today has one major problem, or let's say two key problems: credit and the currency. The stability in the currency is a major problem. It is not cured by where you go and buy your products from. It's cured by your own macroeconomic circumstances. The credit issue is a major matter and must also be structured per our own internal financial system conditions, which are available for us to resolve. So I would just want to encourage government to be a bit more modest in the promises it gives to the public. Otherwise, it raise expectations that sometimes we just may not be able to sustain.
Let me ask you directly, is this promise one that can be sustained?
One thing I can say for sure is that the devil will always be in the details, but this market does not just shed margins at any level. It has to be value for value. There are a number of things that government may be able to save. A country like the Emirates is really a lever for certain metals that we may like, or certain goods that we may have. Just like the Chinese one day swapped our crude for funding for Ghana gas, they can also do certain things that may create flexibilities. But value will always be for value. Ghana is not going to go into a swap arrangement with each crude and say, I'm going to sell our crude affordably to any counterparty anywhere in the world. It is hardly done. That kind of gift is not a very viable proposition. But just manage your expectations and your communication.
Well, today the minority in Parliament has been addressing a news conference on the matter. Minority spokesperson on mines and energy, John Junapo, described government's approach as wishful thinking.
We are saying that the government can apply this. Demonstrated to you that government is gotten more than it required even in the first quarter. We've demonstrated to you that the price stabilization levy, instead of the 260 million, they've gotten about 800 million. We are also adding to the call of President Mahama that the Tema Oil Refinery, as a matter of urgency, with immediate effect, should process Ghana's domestic crude. That can give us about 45,000 barrels of processed crude every day. That will put a less of a burden on the need for forex. This is not rocket science. This is something we attempted doing by giving Tema Oil Refinery 2 million barrels of oil from the 10 fields under President Mahama. This government took over and sold that barrels of oil. And so something can be done. The president says he's going to look for cheaper oil. From where?
From APAM.
And he did not even give us timelines. These wishful thinkings would not solve the problem. The only thing that will solve it is a practical way, and we have enumerated steps that the president can take in order to address the challenge that we are going through.
Well, one of the steps he announced today at the press conference is for the government to fall on the windfall savings from our export of crude to cushion Ghanaians.
Fuel that was selling at 6.5 CD per liter has now increased by 300%. In less than 1 year, the price of fuel at the pump has increased by more than 300%. Indeed, today, fuel is more costly than even the minimum wage. I've never witnessed that in my life. Today, as we speak, a gallon of diesel sells at about 105 Ghana cedi. This government is making so much money from the Ukraine-Russian war. In the 2022 budget, government projected that it will receive a total amount of about 6 billion for the whole of 2022. That is what was projected in the budget. Today, as we speak, from the PIAC report, in less than 3 months, and I mean just 1 quarter, government has received over 8 billion cedis from our petroleum resources. So in 3 months, government has received more than it projected for the whole year. So government is making supernormal profit. In fact, even the price stabilization and recovery levy, which is supposed to sum the first 2 quarters, it will receive 269 million. As we speak, from the Ministry of Finance's own record, government has received about 800 million. And so this notion that government is not making revenue is a fallacy, it's a complete falsehood. Government is making so much money from our petroleum resources. I therefore call on President Akufo-Addo and the outgoing Minister of Finance that they should do something about this price increment. These difficult moments, if it means that government has to use part of our petroleum resources to subsidize fuel, let them do that. Moreover, there's a price stabilization and recovery levy. It is there to subsidize fuel.
Exactly.
It has accumulated a lot of money, and they should apply that money.
John Junapor joins us on the telephone line right now. Also joining us for a conversation is Executive Director at the Institute for Energy Security, Nana Amwesi. Mr. Junapor, your proposal hinges on government, using the windfall savings from crude exports to cushion Ghanaians. I mean, in the time of crisis such as we have, those savings have all been eating up already, have they not?
That is even the more reason why government must cushion Ghana. Specifically because we are in crisis. And when we are in crisis, you prioritize. The living condition of the people is more important than all those foreign trips and other expenses they are incurring. And so if government really wants to prioritize, it will do so that food prices will be cheaper. Because when you reduce the cost of transportation, i.e. through petroleum products, foods to the market will be cheaper. And we are not asking government to go for some money somewhere. We are saying that the price stabilization recovery levy has made about 3 times what it was projected to achieve. So those monies should not be used for other purposes, but should be applied to or for their intended purpose. That is 1. 2 is that, like we've demonstrated, we wanted X amount for the whole year. In just 1 quarter, we've already exceeded that amount. So we are making huge windfalls. And in very difficult circumstances such as this, we can apply some of those funds. We also say that in emergency situations, you take emergency measures. Toll may not be that efficient. Toll may not be up to scratch. But in these difficult moments, we should do everything possible and get the Tema Oil Refinery to process some of our crude.
But that would mean spending money we don't have to get Toll up to scratch.
That will mean doing something immediately that will save you a lot of money going forward. We've been scratching the surface, and today we are in deep hole. We can't continue like that. I've checked the figures. Toll doesn't require so much to come up to production. And if we want to do that within the shortest possible time, that can be done. The other last one has to do with the forex. Contrary to the assurance from the Bank of Ghana that they will provide forex from the BDCs, they are unable to do that. And so the BDCs are compelled to use speculation in order to hedge against future forex challenges. And so some BDCs are using 18 CDs to the dollar
which is putting a huge pressure on the Ghanaian. So Bank of Ghana and the government must make do with their promise to provide forex to the BDCs so that there can be some level of certainty, some level of predictability, and some level of calmness in the market. The level of volatility is also contributing to the huge increase at the pump. And we think that it is unfortunate. Evans, today crude price is about 96. In January, when a liter was selling for about 6 cedi, international crude price was about 96. So if you tell us that it's because of crude price increase, and today we are back to the January level, why should we pay 300% increase as compared to the price in January?
Exchange rate fundamentally, isn't it?
What has been the depreciation of the dollar, of the cedi against the dollar? Is it 300%? Are we saying it's 300%? Comparatively, you look at what government is telling you. Government itself says that the depreciation of the cedi against the dollar is less than 50%. And yet, even though crude oil price at parity compared to that of January, we are paying about 300%. This is illogical.
Hey, Mr. Jinapo, considering how biting this current economic crisis is, and it stems from the cost of fuel and everybody else is feeling it, if government could really spend those windfall savings and they really had enough money in the stabilization fund, you don't think they would have used it by now as a matter of urgency?
But that is what the majority side is asking for their own finance minister to be booted out. But they don't even have confidence in the finance minister.
But that's to suggest that the money is simply not there, or something else is more pressing is taking.
If the finance minister couldn't do anything, if he has indeed done his best, and we're all convinced that he's done his best, 80 of his own MPs wouldn't be calling for the head of the finance minister. 80 MPs from their side are calling for his head because they believe he's not performing up to standard. So this narrative will not work at all.
But you concede, though. I mean, you're in Parliament. Have they opened the books up for you to verify how much we have saved?
All the figures I'm quoting are from the Ministry of Finance, from the Bank of Ghana, and from the Public Interest and Accountability Committee. Every figure I've mentioned are from official sources. So we are quoting from official sources.
I mean, let me bring in Nanamwesi a second. Mr. Jinapo, just hold on for me briefly. Nanamwesi, what's your take on the suggestion that fall on the windfall savings that we are making and also the price stabilization levy to cushion Ghanaians? Is that realistic?
Thanks for having me, Evans. Good evening to you, to your listeners. Evans, let's put this on record that we are not the only country in Africa that is confronted with the fallout of the COVID or the Russian-Ukraine conflict, which is talking international prices of fuel and oil. But our peers have similar mechanisms or strategies with which they manage their domestic fuel pricing. They either apply subsidies, they either or ensure that they have strong local currency. Some have long-term supply contracts with refineries and oil trading companies. Some have decided to suspend some taxes and levies on the price build-up, or they have maximized the use of their own crude oil for the countries that have crude oil. And so this is what others have done. That is why you don't hear that in Togo, in Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, and the likes. But then in Ghana, it seems all this mechanism is at our disposal, we've not been able to maximize it. And so this is where we are today. You talk about the price stabilization recovery levy. Yes, over the last 6 years, it has not been able to stabilize price because of the way it's been applied. Today, you've seen a letter from the MPA suggesting that they are removing the subsidies on RFO. What does that tell you, Evans? It tells you that the price stabilization recovery account is depleted. And so you cannot rely, at this moment, you cannot rely on that fund to stabilize prices. What the minorities should concern themselves with is to ask for a full account of how they utilize the price stabilization and recovery levy. That is one. Now, the minority speaks about the windfall from our crude oil sales. Yes, of course, we are selling our crude oil $30 more than what we projected. And so for sure, there is a windfall from that crude oil sales. And that we can use to cushion consumers by way of subsidies. That is a good call. And I am for that. The IES is for that.
I mean, the first point you made, Mr. Junapo, I know you requested some time back for a full account of what the stabilization fund had been used for. Did you get a brief on this?
Yes, and I have the 2019, 2020, 2021 report. The Ministry of Finance borrowed monies from the stabilization fund to pay pensions. So it's not as if we are making a call out of the blue. We are making this call because this minister is noted for misapplying the stabilization fund. I do recall that I proved to you that of the total energy sector levies received, 2 billion could not be accounted for. And so it's not as if we don't know what we're talking about. We are speaking and calling on the minister because there's record and he has the penchant for using the stabilization fund, the price stabilization recovery levy, for purposes that are not directly under the remit of the price stabilization recovery levy. So we are well grounded on that score.
And since we are in crisis, you agree that in crisis you don't take any solution off the table. One of the solutions the president had intimated, in fact, now we have a team in Abu Dhabi already negotiating to get affordable petroleum products for the Ghanaian market. But you say that is wishful thinking. How so?
Because in this petroleum industry, there's nothing like free lunch. They also have their challenges. But more specifically, like I stated, we're expecting some timelines from the president that probably within 1 month or 2 months or 3 weeks or 1 week, we anticipate that we would get A, B, C, D. But if you just say that you are going to try and that if you are lucky, that's wishful thinking because you are wishing that it will go through. It's not as if you've achieved something concrete. It's not as if you have something you are really stepping on in terms of timelines. You are only wishing. And so let's see and hope that the wish of the president, and if you listen to the statement very well, he says that if they are successful, so they are only going to try and they hope and wish that they succeed. So we wish them well. Let them go and negotiate. And when they return, let them tell us the outcome of that negotiation. But like Senor Jose and the others said, you ought to be very, very cautious when making such promises within the petroleum spectrum.
Mr. Moses, what do you make of that approach, securing affordable petroleum products on the international market?
Evans, I don't know who is advising the energy minister because the venture they are undertaking is far from possibility. This is not how the energy sector works. And so I think we should rather be careful. But if they come back and tell us that they've gotten some discounts on any fuel, of course, we must ask them to declare the full discount value. It's important. They must tell Ghanaians what they also give in return for that favor. And also, we must be very careful. And our fear as IES is that they will be or they could be giving out something for free in order to get that discount because no country, no refinery market works like that. If there is a market that can give you a huge discount to beat all the markets over the world, I'm sure the BDCs will have gone for it. So let's be careful the venture that we are taking. And we pray that this is not an attempt to waste the country's mega resources or any attempt to enrich a few people to the detriment of over 30 million Ghanaians, or a deliberate attempt to grow the energy sector debt.
Nana Mwisi, thank you very much. He is Executive Director of the Institute for Energy Security. Earlier, you had the minority spokesperson on Mines Energy, John Jinapo. Let's stay with the issue about the fuel price crisis that is biting hard. And I know many of you tonight are feeling the pinch because the favorite trotro route is now very expensive with the GPLT increasing the fares exponentially on the back of this recent historic jump in the prices of the pumps. More than 3 cities have been added since the increases happened early this week. Now, this is now having an impact now on our industries as well. Talking about residual fuel, because there's a huge shortage of residual fuel, which the industries use to power their plants, has forced the industries now to accept to pay higher prices as government suspends the subsidies. Listen to the head of economic regulation at the National Petroleum Authority, Abbas Ibrahim, speaking at the press conference today.
From the beginning of this year, as we all know, prices on the world market have risen significantly. We've also seen the exchange rate rising significantly. And therefore, the revenue or the revenue we generate from the PSR, the Price Stabilization and Recovery Levy, has not been enough to pay for the subsidies that are accruing on these two products. As the prices and the exchange rate rise, the subsidy levels also rise because the full cost of the products are not being passed on to the consumer. It has become unsustainable to keep the subsidies on RFO because the subsidy we have on it is affecting its supply. The suppliers of these products are refusing to supply the products because the subsidies are not being paid on time. That is one. And also, because the subsidies are not being paid on time, the companies have refused to supply the product. They sell and they are not recovering the full cost, and they are not also getting the subsidy paid to them. And therefore, the manufacturing industry has suffered to access this product. This led them to close down their factories, and they have not been producing. So it's been a challenge for them. We've engaged them, and the solution was that to help them to get the product available, it would be better for them to pay the full cost than to not have the product and get their factories running. And therefore, the resolution was that in the meantime, the subsidy on RFO should be removed so that they can have access to this product. It's important to note that the alternative product they can use is diesel. As we all know, the cost of diesel is very, very high now. So the industry prefers to pay for the full cost of RFO so they can continue running their factories than not to have the product at all. And that's the reason why we issued that letter indicating that the subsidy we have on residual fuel oil has been suspended in the interim.
Abdul Kudus Mohammed speaks for the National Petroleum Authority and joins us on the telephone line right now. Kudus, thank you for your time here on Top Story.
Thank you for having me.
So, clarify, the decision to suspend was primarily, suspend the subsidies for residual fuel for the industry. It was primarily because there was shortage brought on by our inability to pay the subsidies. Of course, suppliers and say, if you aren't paying the subsidies, I can supply. So that led to shortage. That fundamentally was the issue.
Let me say good evening to your listeners. So primarily, it has to do with the accruals. So the subsidy or the levy is normally pulled into an account, and that is what is used to subsidize the price of premix and RFO. But because of the rising cost and the challenging times that we have found ourselves, it is not enough to even take care of one of the two reasons for which it is used to subsidize. So the decision was now to be made between RFO and premix, which probably should be prioritized. So the money was not enough. The collection was still going on. But because of the challenge of inability to meet all of the two, you needed to settle on one. And that was why the decision was taken that it should be settled on premix and to allow the suppliers to continue to be able to supply so the industrial users would be able to get the product to buy. Because if you were to sustain or insist on the subsidy, yet the fund is not able to cater for that, it would create a shortage of the product, and industry would not be able to get the product to run their business.
Could you confirm the premix fuel still has subsidies on it that you haven't
Yes.
suspended.
Yes.
It is
Yes.
residual fuel for industries that you've now suspended the subsidies.
Absolutely.
I mean, what it is tonight is that industries will pay full value for residual
Absolutely.
fuel.
Absolutely.
Okay. Has that eased the shortage problem that you were facing now?
Obviously, the shortage was due to the inability to pay for the subsidy. So now that you have said that you are removing the subsidy and there will be a full cost recovery, you are guaranteed of supply, and then the industrial users would have the product to be able to control with their business.
I mean, it's inevitable now, is it not, that the industries will now also have to pass on the extra cost to their end users or consumers?
That discussion has not actually been brought to my attention, and I have not been able to speak to that yet.
Do we
What
know?
is available on my table, it has to do with the withdrawal of the subsidy.
This is a suspension. Do we know how long it's going to be on the table? How long the suspension will last?
We're hoping for a certain stability within the market. We've all seen the volatility and how prices have changed over time. We're hoping that when we see a certain stability and we're able to guarantee enough accumulation of the fund into the account that can still cater for both the premix and RFO, certainly would be reinstated. So for now, we're all going to be watching the market and see what the future will be like for all of us.
Thank you very much, Abdul Kudus Mohammed. He speaks for the National Petroleum Authority. We have more on this, and of course, the ongoing crisis, the cost of living crisis, and the impact on yourselves on Newsnight in a minute.